You are listening to the 5 Squared Podcast, the podcast where we bring you tips for your business and your life. Our goal is to leave you smarter with ideas, wisdom, tools, and entertained. The 5 Squared Podcast is produced weekly for your enrichment. Come back often and feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or iTunes. You can also follow me on Twitter at 5 Squared and Facebook. All the links are in the show notes. Now let's get started with your host, business consultant, executive coach, and founder of 5 Squared, Tim Fives.
Welcome back to the 5 Squared Podcast with your host, Tim Fives. Hope everyone's having a wonderful day out there in listener land. We had a great day today at 5 Squared, and I'm happy to be part of the organization SCORE, mentoring businesses and entrepreneurs in the York area here in the Susquehanna region. And we had the opportunity today to speak to a bunch of students over at the York County Technical School, and it was a fantastic experience, and I want to thank them for having us. And we had a great panel today. You can check out their sites in the show notes. But and you can check us out on the Facebook page. We have some video that we took there as well. But it was really interesting to me, and this ties into a talk that I gave the other night at for one of my charities about, and we've been spending a lot of time on this topic of emotional intelligence and whatnot. And I thought it was an interesting case study today. We had a great group of students in there and talking about business and how they felt about going into business for themselves. We were talking to the cosmetology department over there, and the kids were fantastic. And there was a lot of enthusiasm for wanting to learn more about going into business. And, one of the things that came to mind as we looked across the kids that were there, the majority of them were really engaged and were fantastic. A lot of great questions, a lot of hard questions. But there was an interesting dichotomy about their questions. And they were all rooted in fear, right? Well, when the question was asked, how do you feel? What comes to mind when you're starting a business? And a lot of it was, well, okay, there was funding. How do I get money? Money's important. Okay, that's pretty benign, middle of the road question. But from there, it was, well, what happens if you take a loan and your business folds? Or how do what happens about failure? And they were out, most of the questions, I would say 90% of the questions were about what happens if. And I asked the kids there, we're all talking now about, planning and, planning not to fail. And I brought up the point, what about planning for success? What would that feel like? We're all talking about the what if it doesn't work, but what if it does work? And I think that really is something that is missing in in what we're teaching in our society, is that we put so much emphasis on failure. We put so much emphasis on, well, you better be careful, it might not work. And my good friend Lou Laventon, who was there, who runs Sparkle Wash, he came out and said, look, he's a serial entrepreneur. Some have worked, some haven't. And you got to learn from those mistakes. And if you're learning from those mistakes, then they're not failures. If you are doomed to repeat them over and over, then I guess maybe they could be considered a failure. But I thought it was an interesting study could be done on the mindsets of these students, and not just here, but I hear this all the time. What if it doesn't work? Tim, what if if it doesn't work? Are you making money? Are you doing this? Are you, how do we gauge success? And I really, really get my clients and my teams and the people that I do these talks for to focus on the good, focus on success, right? Success breeds success. If you're focused on being successful, your mind will find a way. So one of the things I was meeting with a client today, and we were talking about a variety of things with his business, but we got on this topic, and he's just a fantastic gentleman, and we were talking about other talks and things, and I saw this I wanted to share this because, there's a meme going around on social media. So maybe you've seen this, and I think this applies to all of us, and it applies to our mindset. So, story goes like this: there's a kid, they're a young kid, probably 6 or 7 years old, and he finds himself pondering life, and he goes to his father and he says, "Dad, what's the value of my life?" And his dad picks up a rock and hands it to the kid, and he says, take the stone to the market and sell it. And he's like, and if you sell it, he's like, but you can't use any words. The only thing you can do is hold up 2 fingers. So kid goes to the market, picks it, one of the vendors there says, "Yeah, I'll buy your stone. How much?" And he holds up 2 2 fingers. And the vendor says, "All right, I'll give you $2 for it." And the kid runs home. And then the dad said, "Great. Pardon me. Why don't you take it to the museum? Same thing, son. Just hold up 2 fingers." The kid runs down to the museum. And the curator there is like, "Ooh, that's a nice stone. How much do you want?" And the kid holds up 2 fingers. And the curator says, "I'll give you $200 for that stone." And the kid's ecstatic and he runs home. Dad said, "That's great, son. Why don't you take it to the fine jeweler down the street?" The kid runs down the street, walks in, shows the store owner the stone, and the store owner says, "Well, do you want to sell it?" And the kid holds up 2 fingers and he's like, "I'll give you $200,000 for the stone." Kid runs home, his mind's blown, and his dad says, "Do you understand? The value of our life is the situation we put ourselves in." And that goes with the way we think about ourselves, the people we interact with on a daily basis, and our overall outlook on how we position things. Now, one of my coaches told me not so long ago, if you want to make money, Tim, it's really simple. You got to put yourself where the people are that buy your product. And it was an interesting reminder to take a hard look at where we spend our time. And if you're in business for yourself, it's very apropos to take a hard look and say, like, where am I spending my time? Am I spending it in the right places? And in conjunction with that story, when I look back at today's activity with these kids, I just said, you aren't in the right place. You're not valuing what you're doing. They might enjoy it, but it was interesting that probably less than 20% actually had passion for what they were doing. A lot of them were like, "Yeah, I'm here. I can make some money at this. That's it." But then you had the spark of a few that were, "I really enjoy this. I really can make people look beautiful." And that lit them up. And that's part of being in the right place. It's a huge part of being in the right frame of mind so that you can be successful. So I just wanted to leave you with these thoughts for the day and really take evaluation of your life. If you're not where you want to be, if you're not happy, there's a reason for it. And the reason is looking at you in the mirror. The only person that has the power to change their situation is the one that looks back at you from the mirror. So think about this. If you don't like it, if you're not successful, if you're not in the right place, you're not doing what you want to do, then make a change. And the power to make that change is within you. It's within all of us. If I think about some laws, I guess, more universal constants, I think about a few of these. And this was part of the talk I gave the other night. And what we focused on was, what are some of these universal truths, right? Well, there's 2 always come to mind. People always say this, it's death and taxes. Okay, great. But then there's other ones. There's other ones like people, 9 out of 10 people will help a fellow human being. It's in who we are as human beings. And it was interesting when I gave that talk, people were like, "Well, I'm not so sure about that." And I reminded them of the horrific events of the hurricanes in the South over the summer and in fall. And one of the things that you saw was other people helping other people. Race didn't matter, ethnicity didn't matter, creed didn't matter, sexual orientation didn't matter. None of it mattered. They saw somebody in need and they rushed to help them. And what ends up happening is after that, and it always feels good to help people in those situations, but it feels just as good to help people when you're not in those situations to overachieve. And the next constant is that we are put on this earth to live a full and meaningful life. And, if you're a Christian, Jesus came and said that too. In John 10:10, he said, I have come so that they may have life and have it more abundantly. What a beautiful quote. But that's why we're here. So if these things are true, well, let me come back. If those things were not true, then nobody would ever pull themselves out of poverty. Nobody would ever pull themselves up by their bootstrap, the Tony Robbins of the world, the Oprah Winfreys of the world. So they are truths. And the thing that limits us is our belief system and what we tell ourselves. And I come full circle back to these kids this morning because you could see that they did not believe, that they've already got a set of limiting beliefs. And it was sad. And it's just sad to think about that here's all of this beautiful young talent sitting there just waiting to be unleashed onto the world. And they didn't see it in themselves. So, my listeners, take it upon yourselves to be a leader. Take it upon yourself to encourage people to see the good in themselves and the value that they bring to this world, because that's why we're all here. I sign off. Have a great evening. Enjoy the cool winter weather that's coming. And I'll see you next time on the 5 Squared Podcast.
Thank you so much for listening to the show with your host, Tim Fives. We hope you will pass along our web address, 5squared.com, to your friends and colleagues. Be sure to check out our archives section on our website for previous podcasts. Follow us on Twitter at 5 Squared or follow us on Facebook. This has been a 5 Squared production. Join us next time for another edition of the 5 Squared Podcast.